The shuttle docked with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Park Do-hyun stood inside, his small bag over his shoulder, waiting for the doors to open. His heart beat fast, but his face showed nothing. He had practiced this calm expression many times before leaving Earth. He knew what waited for him on the other side. The doors slid apart, and Do-hyun stepped onto the Galactic Survey Corps vessel, called the Endless Dawn. The corridor stretched before him, clean and white, with soft lights glowing along the ceiling. Aliens of different shapes moved past him. Some walked on two legs like him. Others floated. One creature that looked like a cloud of smoke drifted by without looking at him. Do-hyun was the third human ever assigned to this ship. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. In the galaxy, that made them babies. Newcomers. Primitives. A tall figure approached him. She stood nearly 2 meters high, with pale blue skin that seemed to shine under the lights. Her eyes were large and silver, with no pupils that Do-hyun could see. Long fingers extended from hands that had an extra joint. She wore the dark uniform of the Survey Corps, with golden marks on her collar that showed her high rank. This was Commander Elitha of the Valari species. She was the ship's senior xenobiologist, an expert in alien life forms. She had studied creatures on over 200 worlds. Her work was famous throughout the galactic community. She looked at Do-hyun the way someone might look at a stain on their shoe. "You are the human," she said. It was not a question. Do-hyun nodded. "Yes, Commander." Park Do-hyun, reporting for duty as trainee field observer. Elitha's thin lips pressed together. She turned and began walking, clearly expecting him to follow. Do-hyun did, his shorter legs working hard to keep pace with her long stride. "I will be direct with you," Elitha said as they walked. "I did not request a human on my team. I did not want a human on my team. Your species has been part of the galactic community for less than one of your generations. You have no experience with true xenobiology. Your training programs are basic at best." She stopped suddenly and turned to face him. Other crew members in the corridor slowed to watch. "Tell me," Elitha said, her voice carrying so others could hear. "Why should the Survey Corps waste resources on soft-skinned persistence hunters from a death world? What can you possibly offer that our established members cannot?" Do-hyun felt the eyes on him. A small creature with wings and too many legs made a clicking sound that he recognized as laughter. This was Navigator Bin of the Keth species. He stood near the wall, watching with obvious amusement. Do-hyun had expected this. The research files he had studied before leaving Earth were very clear. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy, and it was not a good one. They were seen as emotional, primitive, and physically weak. Their only notable feature was that they came from a planet so dangerous that most species wondered how they had survived at all. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Its gravity was strong. Its weather was violent. Its wildlife had spent millions of years trying to eat each other. The fact that humans had crawled out of that mess and reached the stars was seen as a miracle of luck, not skill. Do-hyun took a breath. He could defend himself. He could explain that humans had qualities that didn't show on scans. He could talk about endurance, adaptability, pattern recognition, social bonding. He could mention that humans had hunted creatures 10 times their size, using nothing but patience and sharp sticks. But he had also learned something else in his training. Actions spoke louder than words, especially to species that had already decided not to listen. "I don't know, Commander," he said calmly. "I suppose I'll have to show you. I suppose I'll have to show you." Elitha's silver eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected anger, or defense, or perhaps begging. The calm response seemed to confuse her for just a moment. "Indeed," she said finally. "We shall see." She continued walking. Do-hyun followed. The tour of the ship took an hour. Elitha showed him the science labs, the specimen storage, the shuttle bay, and the observation deck. She introduced him to other crew members with the same tone one might use when introducing a pet. "This is the human trainee," she would say. "He will be assisting with basic tasks." Some crew members nodded politely. Others didn't bother hiding their doubt. One large reptilian creature named Thora, who served as the ship's medic, at least gave Do-hyun a brief nod of acknowledgement, but most simply looked through him as if he wasn't there. Finally, they reached the quarters assigned to Do-hyun. The room was small. Just a bed, a desk, and a storage unit. But it had a window that looked out at the stars, and that was enough. "Your duties begin tomorrow at first shift," Ilitha said. "You will report to Lab 7. You will organize specimen containers. You will clean equipment. You will stay out of the way of actual scientists doing actual work." She paused. "Is that understood?" "Yes, Commander." Ilitha turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "One more thing, human. I have been doing this work for 300 of your years. I have seen species come and go. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. Your kind has been in space for barely a moment. Do not expect to impress anyone here. Do not expect to matter. Simply do your small job and try not to cause problems." She left without waiting for a response. Do-hyun stood alone in his small room. Through the window, distant stars sparkled against the black emptiness of space. Somewhere out there was Earth. A tiny blue dot that most of the galaxy considered a death trap. He set his bag on the bed and began to unpack. There wasn't much. Some clothes, a few personal items, a photograph of his family back in Seoul. His mother had cried when he left. His father had simply nodded and told him to make them proud. Do-hyun looked at the photo for a long moment. Then he placed it on the desk, where he could see it from the bed. On another deck of the ship, in the medical bay, a woman named Kang Yuna watched the security feed on a small screen. She was the ship's human medical liaison, one of only 2 humans aboard before Do-hyun's arrival. She had seen Ilitha's introduction. She had watched the whole thing. Yuna sighed and turned off the screen. She had been on this ship for 2 years. She knew how hard it was to earn respect here. She had fought for every bit of recognition she had received. She also knew something that Ilitha and the others didn't understand. Humans were not impressive at first glance. They were not the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. They didn't have claws or venom or natural armor. But humans had something else. Something that didn't show up in reports or scans. Something that only revealed itself when everything went wrong. Yuna had seen it once, on a mission that had nearly killed her. She had seen what humans became when pushed to the edge. She hoped the crew of the Endless Dawn would never have to learn that lesson. But somehow, watching young Do-hyun stand calmly under Ilitha's insults, she had a feeling that lesson was coming whether anyone wanted it or not. 3 weeks passed aboard the Endless Dawn. Do-hyun did his job without complaint. He organized specimen containers. He cleaned equipment. He labeled samples and filed reports. He did everything Ilitha asked and never once talked back. The other crew members mostly ignored him. They walked past him in corridors without greeting. They spoke about him as if he wasn't in the room. Navigator Bin often made clicking sounds of laughter when Do-hyun struggled with tasks designed for creatures with more than 2 hands. But Do-hyun watched. He listened. He learned. He learned that Ilitha, for all her coldness, was truly brilliant. Her knowledge of alien biology was deep and wide. He learned that Thora, the reptilian medic, was actually kind beneath his rough exterior. He learned that Bin was not as confident as he pretended to be, often making mistakes that he quickly hid before anyone noticed. Do-hyun also spent his free time in the ship's library database. He studied the planets they might visit. He read about dangerous creatures that previous survey teams had encountered. He learned the signs of predator territory, the patterns of hunting behavior, the ways that different life forms communicated threat and fear. He did not know why he felt the need to learn these things. Something in his gut told him to prepare. The same instinct that had kept his ancestors alive on the plains of ancient Earth whispered to him now. Danger is coming. Be ready. On the 23rd day, the assignment came. Captain Morvith, a being made of what looked like living crystal, called a meeting in the main briefing room. All department heads attended. Do-hyun was not invited, but Aletha brought him along to carry her data tablets. We have received orders from Survey Command, Captain Morvith said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. The planet Velkar 7 has been flagged for colonization assessment. Initial scans show rich biodiversity, breathable atmosphere, and abundant resources. No sapient life has been detected. A holographic image of the planet appeared above the table. It was beautiful, covered in thick green jungle and crossed by wide blue rivers. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks hidden by clouds. Commander Aletha, the captain continued, you will lead the ground survey team. Standard procedure: land, catalog life forms, assess dangers, report. Aletha nodded, her silver eyes studying the planet image. How long do we have on the surface? 48 hours for initial survey. If conditions allow, you may extend to 1 week. Understood. I will select my team. After the meeting, Aletha gathered her chosen members in Lab 7. Do-hyun stood in the corner, still holding her data tablets, waiting to be dismissed. Navigator Bin will handle mapping and positioning, Aletha said. Medic Thora will manage field medical needs. 2 security drones will accompany us for protection. She paused, her eyes moving to Do-hyun. And the human trainee will carry sample containers. Bin made his clicking laugh. Are you certain, Commander? He will carry containers and stay out of the way, Aletha said flatly. If he cannot manage even that, we will know he is truly useless. Do-hyun said nothing. He simply nodded. That night, he reviewed everything the database had on Velkar 7. The information was limited. The planet had been scanned from orbit, but never explored on foot. The scans showed many life forms, including several large predators, but nothing that the security drones couldn't handle. Something bothered Do-hyun about the data, but he couldn't identify what. The readings seemed incomplete somehow. There were gaps in the scan patterns, areas where the sensors had returned strange results. He mentioned this to Dr. Kang Yuna when he visited the medical bay for his required pre-mission health check. You're worried, Yuna said. It wasn't a question. The scans don't feel right, Do-hyun admitted. There's something missing. Yuna finished her examination and set down her instruments. I've learned to trust human instincts. We evolved, surrounded by things that wanted to kill us. That kind of history leaves marks on the brain. She looked at him seriously. See. Wei, be careful down there. And if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Don't let anyone tell you you're imagining things. Do-hyun nodded. I'll be careful. One more thing. Yuna opened a drawer and pulled out a small knife in a leather sheath. Take this. It's not standard equipment, but I've carried one on every mission since I came aboard. Sometimes the old tools are the best tools. Do-hyun took the knife, feeling its weight in his hand. It was simple, with a sharp steel blade and a wooden handle. Nothing special, but it felt right somehow, like meeting an old friend. Thank you, Doctor. Stay alive, Do-hyun. Show them what humans can do. The next morning, the survey team assembled in the shuttle bay. The shuttle was small but well-equipped, designed for short planetary missions. The 2 security drones floated nearby, their smooth surfaces hiding powerful weapons. Aletha inspected her team with a critical eye. Bin checked his navigation equipment. Thora loaded medical supplies into the shuttle. Do-hyun stood ready with a harness full of empty sample containers strapped to his back. Before we depart, Aletha said, I want to remind everyone of standard safety protocols. Stay together. Follow my instructions. Do not touch unknown life forms. Let the drones handle any threats. Her gaze settled on Do-hyun. And if you are the human trainee, stay behind the group and do not interfere with scientific work. Understood, Commander. Do-hyun said. The shuttle launched smoothly, dropping from the endless dawn and entering the atmosphere of Velkar 7. Through the windows, Do-hyun watched the planet grow larger. The green jungle spread below them like a vast carpet. Strange birds with too many wings flew past the shuttle, curious about the new arrival. They landed in a clearing near a river. The air that entered when the doors opened was warm and wet, heavy with the smell of growing things. The jungle surrounded them on all sides, dense and dark despite the bright sun overhead. Do-hyun stepped onto the alien soil and felt something he couldn't explain. A tightness in his chest, a prickling at the back of his neck. Every instinct in his body suddenly screamed that something was watching them. He looked at the jungle. The trees were tall, with thick trunks, covered in vines. Strange flowers bloomed in colors he had no names for. Small creatures moved in the undergrowth, quick flashes of motion that disappeared when he tried to focus on them. And beneath all of that, a silence. The kind of silence that falls when predators are near. Do-hyun noticed something else. The lower branches of nearby trees were broken at a consistent height. Claw marks scarred the bark in parallel lines, and there were no small animals visible near the clearing. They had all fled. Commander, he said quietly, I think we should. I did not ask for your opinion, trainee. Elitha cut him off without looking at him. She activated her scanner and began walking toward the tree line. Bin, establish a perimeter map. Thora, begin collecting soil samples. Human, make yourself useful, and prepare the containers. Do-hyun wanted to argue. The warning signs were obvious to him, but he was a trainee, a primitive, a soft-skinned human from a death world. Why would anyone listen to him? He knelt and began preparing the sample containers. But his eyes never stopped moving, watching the jungle, watching the shadows between the trees. Whatever was out there, it was watching back. He was certain of it. The jungle of Velkar 7 seemed to breathe around them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch made Do-hyun's muscles tense. But the rest of the team moved through the vegetation without concern, trusting their equipment and their experience. Commander Elitha walked at the front, her scanner humming as it recorded data about every plant and creature they passed. Behind her, Navigator Bin floated on his small wings, projecting a three-dimensional map from a device on his wrist. Medic Thora brought up the rear, his heavy footsteps crushing the soft ground beneath him. The two security drones drifted silently on either side of the group. They were the latest model, equipped with motion sensors, thermal imaging, and plasma weapons, capable of stopping any known predator. The Survey Corps had used them on hundreds of worlds. They had never failed. Do-hyun walked in the middle of the group, his back bent under the weight of the sample containers. Sweat dripped down his face in the humid air. His legs ached from stepping over roots and pushing through thick undergrowth. But he kept his eyes on the jungle around them, watching for the danger he knew was there. 15 minutes into their survey, he noticed the first sign, a patch of disturbed earth near a large tree. The soil had been scraped away in long parallel lines, as if something with massive claws had been digging. The marks were fresh, still moist. Made within the last few hours. Do-hyun stopped. Commander, Elitha didn't look back. What is it now? Human. There are tracks here. Large predator. Recent. Bin made his clicking laugh. The human is scared of some scratches in the dirt. Well. Bin. Wind? The drones have detected no large fauna within 2 kilometers, Elitha said, still walking. Your primitive instincts are making you see threats that don't exist. Keep moving. Do-hyun looked at the marks again. Then he looked at the drones floating calmly nearby. Their sensors showed nothing. But Do-hyun had grown up in the mountains of Korea, where his grandfather had taught him to hunt. He knew what predator signs looked like, and he knew that some creatures were smart enough to avoid detection. He said nothing more and continued walking. but he loosened the knife in its sheath at his belt, the one Dr. Yuna had given him. They traveled deeper into the jungle. The trees grew taller and closer together, blocking out more of the sunlight. The air became thicker, harder to breathe. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, calls and cries from creatures they couldn't see. Elitha collected samples with practiced efficiency. She cut leaves from unusual plants, captured small insects in clear tubes, and scraped bark from trees that oozed glowing sap. Her scanner recorded everything, building a database of Velkar 7's biology. Thora found a pool of water fed by a small stream. He knelt to collect a sample, his thick fingers careful with the delicate container. "The water is clean," he reported. "High mineral content. Good for colonization." "Excellent," Elitha said. "Mark this location on the map, Bin." Do-hyun stood apart from the others, watching the tree line. The feeling of being watched had grown stronger. He could almost feel eyes on his back, patient and calculating. Waiting. Then he saw it. Movement in the canopy above. Just a shadow. There and gone in an instant. But it was too large to be a bird. Too smooth to be a branch falling. "Something's up there," he said, pointing upward. The others stopped and looked where he pointed. The trees swayed gently in a breeze that didn't reach the ground. Nothing else moved. "I see nothing," Bin said. "The drones detect nothing," Elitha added, checking her scanner. "Human, your constant warnings are becoming tiresome. If you cannot control your fear responses, perhaps you should wait." At the shuttle, Do-hyun opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the jungle exploded into chaos. The first drone died instantly. Something massive dropped from the trees above. 6 limbs, ending in claws that tore through the drone's metal shell like paper. The creature moved so fast that Do-hyun's eyes couldn't track it. One moment the drone was floating. The next it was scattered across the ground in smoking pieces. Bin screamed, a high-pitched sound that hurt Do-hyun's ears. Thora dropped his sample container and reached for the plasma pistol at his hip. Elitha stumbled backward, her scanner falling from her hands. The second drone spun to face the threat, its weapons charging with a high whine. But before it could fire, another shape burst from the undergrowth. This one was even larger than the first, its dark scales glistening with moisture. It hit the drone from the side, its massive jaws closing around the machine and crushing it in a single bite. Then there was silence. Do-hyun counted 5 of the creatures emerging from the jungle around them. No, 6. Each one was the size of a small shuttle, built low to the ground with powerful legs and long tails. Their scales were dark green, almost black. Perfect camouflage in the shadowy jungle. 6 limbs gave them a spider-like appearance, though their bodies were clearly reptilian. But it was their eyes that made Do-hyun's blood run cold. Each creature had at least 8 eyes arranged around a broad, flat head. And those eyes showed intelligence. These weren't mindless predators. They were hunters, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The Velkari. That's what Do-hyun would later call them. Though in this moment, he had no name for the nightmares that surrounded his team. They had been watching since the shuttle landed. They had observed the drones and determined they were the biggest threat. They had waited until the team was deep in their territory, far from escape. Then they had struck the drones first, removing the only real defense before the organic prey even understood what was happening. This was not an attack. This was a hunt. Elitha tried to speak, cycling through first contact protocols on her wrist device. Electromagnetic signals. Chemical markers. Sonic patterns. The Valkyrie didn't respond to any of them. They simply watched with their many eyes, slowly tightening the circle around the team. "Commander," Thora said, his voice steady despite the fear Do-hyun could see in his eyes. "I have a clear shot at the large one. Should I fire?" "No," Elitha whispered. "Do not provoke them. If we remain calm, perhaps they will lose interest." But Do-hyun knew better. He could see the tension in the creature's muscles, the way their weight shifted forward onto their front limbs. They weren't going to lose interest. They were preparing for the killing strike. "They're pack hunters," he said quietly. "They're communicating, coordinating." "Impossible," Bin said, his wings buzzing with panic. "The scans showed no sapient life." "Sapient and intelligent aren't the same thing," Do-hyun said. "Wolves aren't sapient, but they know how to hunt together. These things are the same, just bigger, much bigger." One of the Valkyrie moved suddenly, lunging toward Bin. Thora reacted on instinct, firing his plasma pistol. The bolt hit the creature's side, scorching its scales and leaving a blackened wound. The creature screamed, a sound like metal tearing. But it didn't fall. It barely slowed. It retreated only a few steps, testing their defenses, learning what they could do. And in its intelligent eyes, Do-hyun saw something that terrified him more than the creature's size or claws. He saw patience. He saw calculation. He saw a predator that was willing to wait for the perfect moment. They were surrounded. Their drones were destroyed. Their weapons were barely effective. And the shuttle was 15 minutes away. They weren't going to survive that long, unless something changed. Time seemed to slow down as Do-hyun watched the Valkyrie circle them. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was strangely clear. He had felt this before. Once, when he was 12 years old, and a wild boar had charged at him in the forests near his grandfather's village. His grandfather had grabbed him, held him still, and told him not to run. "Running makes you prey," his grandfather had said. "Standing makes you a problem." The boar had stopped, confused by the two humans who refused to flee. It had snorted, stamped its hooves, and eventually turned away to find easier targets. Do-hyun had never forgotten that lesson. But these creatures were not boars. They were apex predators, the top hunters of their world. And there were 6 of them. Commander Elitha was speaking rapidly into her communication device. "Endless dawn. This is ground team. Emergency extraction required immediately. We are surrounded by hostile fauna, both security drones destroyed. Requesting immediate shuttle deployment." Static crackled. Then Captain Morvith's voice came through, distant and broken. "Ground team, acknowledged. Shuttle launching now. Arrival estimated at 15 minutes. 15 minutes, Thora growled. "We don't have 15 minutes. Elitha's calm finally broke. "I know that," she snapped. Her silver eyes darted between the creatures surrounding them, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. "Everyone stay close. Don't make sudden movements. Perhaps if we—" One of the Valkyrie lunged again, this time toward Elitha herself. Thora shoved her aside and fired his pistol. The bolt hit the creature in the shoulder, and it howled in pain. But another creature immediately moved to take its place, testing from a different angle. They were probing, Do-hyun realized. Testing defenses. Learning. In a few more exchanges, they would understand exactly what the team could and couldn't do. And then they would attack for real. Bin was shaking so badly that his wings couldn't keep him airborne. He had landed on the ground and was making a continuous high-pitched sound that might have been crying in his species. "We're going to die," he whimpered. "We're all going to die." "Quiet," Thora commanded, but his own voice was tight with fear. Do-hyun looked at his teammates. Elitha, brilliant and proud, now frozen with terror. Bin, who had mocked him so many times, now reduced to a trembling wreck. Thora, brave but outmatched, his small pistol useless against 6 armored predators, and he looked at himself. A human, a trainee, a primitive, from a death world. A death world. The phrase echoed in his mind. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Its gravity crushed, its weather killed, its wildlife hunted. And yet humans had survived. Not just survived, They had thrived. They had risen to the top of their food chain not through strength or speed or natural weapons, but through something else entirely. Do-hyun's grandfather had taught him about the old days, before technology, before cities, before civilization. Back when humans were just another animal on the African plains, surrounded by predators that were faster, stronger, and deadlier than them. Lions, leopards, hyenas, wild dogs, crocodiles. Humans had no chance against any of them in a fair fight. And yet humans had won. They had spread across the entire planet, while many of those predators became endangered. How? Do-hyun remembered his grandfather's words. We made them afraid of us, not through fighting, not through killing, through something much simpler and much stranger. Humans had learned to look predators in the eye and refuse to act like prey. They had learned to project threat without attacking, to communicate danger without making a move. It was called predator intimidation. It was built into human DNA, written by millions of years of evolution. And it worked because predators were not mindless. They calculated risk and reward. They avoided prey that might injure them, even if they could probably win the fight. An injured predator couldn't hunt, couldn't eat, would die. That calculation was universal. It had to be. Any predator that attacked without thought would eventually pick a fight it couldn't win and die from the wounds. Only careful, calculating predators survived long enough to pass on their genes. The Valkyrie were careful. They were calculating, which meant they could be convinced. Do-hyun straightened his back. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs completely, making his chest expand. He rolled his shoulders back and lifted his chin. His heart was still pounding, but he didn't let it show on his face. Then he stepped forward, past Elitha, past Thora, toward the largest Valkyrie, the alpha of the pack. Human, Elitha hissed. What are you doing? Get back here. Do-hyun didn't answer. He kept walking, his steps slow and deliberate. His eyes locked onto the alpha's largest pair of eyes and didn't look away. The alpha's head tilted slightly, confused by this small creature that was approaching instead of fleeing. Its claws dug into the soil, preparing to strike. Do-hyun stopped 3 meters from the creature, close enough to touch if either of them reached out, close enough to die in an instant if the alpha decided to attack. He stood completely still. The alpha watched him. Its other eyes flicked around, checking on its packmates, checking on the other prey. But its main eyes stayed fixed on Do-hyun. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, the alpha took a step forward, its massive head lowering toward Do-hyun. Saliva dripped from jaws that could bite through steel. Hot breath washed over Do-hyun's face, carrying the smell of rotten meat. Every instinct in Do-hyun's body screamed at him to run, to scream, to fight, to do anything except stand still while death breathed in his face. He didn't move. Instead, he looked deeper into the creature's eyes. He searched for the intelligence he had seen earlier, and he found it. Watching him, evaluating him, trying to understand what he was. You want to know if I'm worth the trouble? Do-hyun said quietly. His voice didn't shake. You want to know if killing me will cost you something? The creature couldn't understand his words, but it understood tone. It understood confidence. And it understood that this small, soft, clawless creature was not acting like prey. Behind Do-hyun, Elitha watched in stunned silence. She had studied predator-prey relationships for 3 centuries. She had observed thousands of species across hundreds of worlds, and she had never, in all that time, seen anything like what the human was doing. He should be dead. By every calculation, by every model, by every rule of predator behavior, the Valkyrie should have killed him the moment he stepped forward. But they hadn't, and Elitha didn't understand why. The Alpha Valkyrie stared at Do-hyun. Its 8 eyes blinked one by one, not all together, creating a strange rippling effect across its massive head. Its claws flexed against the ground, tearing grooves in the soft soil. Every muscle in its powerful body was coiled, ready to strike. But it didn't strike. Do-hyun could feel his teammates watching him. He could hear Bin's panicked breathing, Thora's shifting weight, Elitha's sharp intake of breath. They expected him to die. They were waiting for the moment when the creature's jaws would close around him and end this strange standoff. That moment didn't come, because Do-hyun understood something that 300 years of xenobiology hadn't taught Commander Elitha. He understood what it meant to be prey, and he understood how to stop being prey. On Earth, early humans had faced predators that outmatched them in every physical way. Lions could run faster. Bears were stronger. Wolves had sharper teeth and traveled in packs. Humans had nothing but their minds and their bodies, so they had learned to lie. Not with words, with behavior, with posture, with the subtle signals that predators read when choosing their targets. Humans learned to stand tall when they wanted to run. They learned to stare when they wanted to hide. They learned to walk toward danger when every instinct screamed at them to flee, and it worked. Because predators were gamblers, always calculating odds. A target that didn't run might be confident for a reason. A creature that didn't show fear might have hidden weapons, hidden strength, hidden allies. Was the reward worth the risk? Usually, the answer was no. Easier to find prey that acted like prey. Do-hyun was betting his life that this calculation was universal. He took another step forward. The alpha jerked back, surprised. Its packmates shifted, uncertain. The circle around the team loosened slightly. As the Valkyrie adjusted their positions, Do-hyun reached down slowly, never breaking eye contact with the alpha. His fingers found a fallen branch on the ground, as thick as his wrist, and about a meter long. He picked it up in both hands. The alpha's eyes tracked his movement. Its head lowered, ready to attack, if this was a weapon. Do-hyun gripped both ends of the branch and snapped it cleanly in half. The crack echoed through the jungle. The alpha flinched. It was a demonstration. Not of his strength, which was nothing compared to these creatures, but of his capabilities. "Look what my hands can do," the gesture said. "Look how easily I can break things. Imagine what else I might break." Do-hyun dropped the broken pieces and smiled. In human culture, a smile meant happiness, friendliness, welcome. But that was a learned meaning, taught over thousands of years of civilization. The original meaning of a human smile was much older and much darker. Teeth. A smile bared teeth. It was a threat display, inherited from primate ancestors who showed their fangs to warn rivals away. It said, "I have weapons in my mouth. I am dangerous. Challenge me at your cost." The alpha saw the small, flat teeth in Do-hyun's mouth and didn't understand why they made it uncomfortable. The human's teeth were nothing compared to its own massive fangs. They couldn't pierce the Valkyrie's scales or crack its bones, but something in the alpha's ancient brain, something that had kept its species alive for millions of years, whispered a warning. This creature is wrong. It doesn't act like food. It acts like a threat. Do-hyun took another step forward. The alpha held its ground, but its weight shifted backward. Its claws dug deeper into the soil, bracing instead of preparing to pounce. "That's right," Do-hyun said quietly. "You're not sure about me anymore, are you? I'm not running. I'm not screaming. I'm not doing anything that prey does. And that bothers you." He took another step. The alpha made a sound, deep and rumbling. A warning, but also a question. "You've probably never seen anything like me," Do-hyun continued, his voice steady and calm. "Everything else on this planet runs from you. Everything else is afraid. But I'm walking toward you. And you don't know what that means." Another step. Now he was close enough to touch the creature if he reached out. He could smell its breath, feel the heat radiating from its massive body. The alpha's eyes met his. For a long moment, predator and human stared at each other. Then Do-hyun did something that seemed insane. He turned his back on the creature, gasps from his teammates. Even Thora made a strangled sound of disbelief. Turning your back on a predator was suicide. It was an invitation to attack, a sign of weakness, the ultimate mistake. But Do-hyun knew what he was doing. He walked slowly toward his teammates, placing himself between them and the Valkyrie. His back was straight. His steps were confident. He didn't look over his shoulder. He was sending a message. You are not a threat to me. I do not fear you enough to watch you. You are nothing. It was the most dangerous bluff of his life. Every second, he expected claws to tear through his spine, jaws to close around his neck. His body screamed at him to run, to turn, to fight. He ignored it all. 5 steps, 10 steps, 15. He reached his teammates and turned around. The Alpha was still standing where he had left it. Its packmates had gathered behind it, forming a group instead of a circle. They were no longer surrounding the team. They were watching from a distance, watching and waiting. The Alpha made another sound. This one louder, more commanding. The other, Valkyrie, shifted in response. They were communicating, debating, deciding. What's happening? Elitha whispered. They're thinking, Do-hyun said. They're calculating whether we're worth the trouble. And Do-hyun watched the Alpha. The creature was still staring at him, but something had changed in its posture. The coiled readiness had faded. The hunting tension was gone. I don't know yet, he admitted. But we're still alive. That's more than we had 5 minutes ago. Thora raised his pistol slightly. Should I fire? No. Do-hyun cut him off. Any attack will make us prey again. Right now, they're not sure what we are. The moment we act like food, they'll treat us like food. Bin made a small sound. So, what do? We wait. The jungle was silent around them. Even the insects and birds had gone quiet, as if the whole world was holding its breath. And in that silence, Do-hyun stood between his team and the apex predators, nothing but his posture and his eyes keeping them alive, waiting for the predators to make their choice. Minutes passed like hours. Do-hyun stood facing the Valkyrie, his body aching from the tension of holding himself still and tall. Sweat dripped down his back, soaking his uniform. His legs trembled with the effort of not running, but he didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of the terror that clawed at his insides. The Alpha Valkyrie watched him with those 8 unblinking eyes. Behind it, the pack waited for their leader's decision. Their muscles twitched, with the urge to hunt, to chase, to kill, but they were disciplined. They followed the Alpha's lead, and the Alpha was uncertain. Do-hyun could see it in the way the creature shifted its weight from side to side, in the way its claws relaxed and then tensed again, in the way its eyes kept flicking between him and the rest of the team, calculating, measuring, trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit any pattern it knew. Back toward the clearing, Do-hyun said quietly, not looking at his teammates. Slowly. Don't run. Don't make sudden movements. The shuttle will land in the clearing, Thora said. If we can reach it, we won't make it if we run. They'll chase. They're built for speed. We're not. Then what do we do? Bin's voice was barely a whisper, still shaking with fear. Walk. Calmly. Together. Like we're not afraid. Elitha made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. We are afraid, human. We're terrified. I know. But they don't have to know that. He began moving backward, one slow step at a time. His eyes never left the Alpha. Behind him, he heard his teammates shuffling, following his lead. The Valkyrie watched them move. The Alpha took a step forward, matching their retreat. Testing. Do-hyun stopped. He stared at the Alpha. After a moment, the Alpha stopped too. Good, Do-hyun breathed. It's still not sure. They continued their slow retreat. Step by step, Meter by meter, they moved toward the clearing where they had landed. The Valkyrie followed at a distance, maintaining the gap but not closing it. A silent procession through the jungle, predators and prey locked in a strange dance. Do-hyun's mind raced, even as his body moved with careful slowness. The creatures were following. That meant they hadn't given up. They were waiting for something, some sign of weakness, some opportunity to attack. He needed to give them a reason to leave. Not just doubt, not just uncertainty, but a clear signal that this hunt wasn't worth continuing. His eyes scanned the ground around them. Rocks, branches, vines, the debris of a living jungle. An idea formed in his mind, a dangerous one. But everything about this situation was dangerous. He bent down smoothly and picked up a rock. It was about the size of his fist, heavy and solid. The Alpha's eyes tracked the movement, watching for threat. Do-hyun straightened. Then, with a motion as smooth and natural as breathing, he threw the rock, not at the Valkyrie, past them, into the jungle, behind the pack. The rock flew through the air, fast and accurate, the product of millions of years of human evolution. It crashed through leaves and branches, struck a distant tree trunk with a sharp crack, and fell to the ground. The pack startled. They spun toward the sound, instincts screaming of a threat from behind. For a moment, chaos rippled through their formation as each creature tried to identify the danger. The Alpha recovered quickly, turning back to face Do-hyun. But something new was in its eyes now. Something that looked almost like surprise. Do-hyun picked up another rock. The Alpha's eyes tracked his arm, calculating the angle, the distance, the force. It had seen how far the first rock had traveled. It understood what that meant. Humans couldn't run fast. They couldn't fight well. But they could throw. They could project force at a distance, strike without closing, hurt without being hurt. It was one of their few natural advantages, and they had used it to dominate Earth. Do-hyun threw the second rock. This one flew past the Alpha's head, close enough that the creature flinched. It struck the ground behind the pack and rolled into the undergrowth. He picked up a third rock. The Alpha made a sound, low and uncertain. The pack shuffled, their confidence shaken. They had expected prey that ran and screamed. Instead, they had found a creature that stood its ground, showed no fear, and could strike from a distance. Was this prey worth the risk? Do-hyun hefted the rock in his hand, letting them see it. Then, he looked directly at the Alpha and smiled again. That same teeth-baring expression, that same ancient threat display. "I can hit you before you reach me," the gesture said. "I can hurt you without getting close. Is killing me worth an injured eye? A damaged leg? A wound that slows you down and makes you vulnerable to bigger predators?" The Alpha stared at him. Its 8 eyes blinked, one by one. Then it made a sound. Sharp, commanding, a single bark that echoed through the jungle. The pack responded immediately. As one, they turned and melted back into the undergrowth. Within seconds, the 6 massive predators had vanished, leaving nothing but crushed vegetation and claw marks in the soil. The jungle fell silent. Do-hyun stood frozen, the rock still in his hand. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't breathe. His body finally began to shake, tremors running through his muscles as the adrenaline crashed through his system. "They're gone," Thora said, his voice filled with wonder. "They actually left. Did that just happen?" Bin asked. "Did the human just scare them away?" "Ah. Did the human just happen? Did the human just scare them away?" Do-hyun dropped the rock. His legs gave out, and he sat down hard on the jungle floor. His hands were shaking so badly that he couldn't hold them still. "We need to keep moving," he managed to say. "They might come back. We need to reach the shuttle." Elitha moved to his side. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Her silver eyes held an expression he had never seen before, something that might have been respect. "Can you walk?" she asked. Her voice was different now, softer. Do-hyun nodded. He forced himself to his feet. Though his legs felt like water, the team continued toward the clearing. They moved faster now, but still didn't run. The lesson had been learned. 5 minutes later, they broke through the tree line and stumbled into the open space where their shuttle sat waiting. The shuttle's pilot, a being made of crystalline structures similar to Captain Morveth, was already powering up the engines. "Hurry," the pilot called. "I detected large fauna moving in the area. What happened to the drones?" "Long story," Thora said as he helped Bin up the ramp. "Just get us out of here." Do-hyun was the last to board. Before he entered the shuttle, he turned and looked back at the jungle. The trees stood silent, dark shapes against the bright sky. Nothing moved in their shadows. But somewhere in there, he knew. The Valkyrie were watching. They had retreated, but they hadn't forgotten. They would remember the strange creature that had refused to be prey. Do-hyun climbed into the shuttle, and the door sealed behind him. They had survived. Against all odds, against all logic, against every rule of predator and prey that the galaxy had ever known, they had survived. Because one human had remembered what his species had always known. That sometimes, the best way to avoid being eaten was to convince the predator that you weren't worth the trouble. The endless dawn hung in orbit above Velkar 7, the beautiful green planet slowly rotating beneath it. Inside the ship, the mood was quiet. The story of what had happened on the surface had spread quickly through the crew. Passed from mouth to mouth, antenna to antenna, tendril to tendril, the human trainee had saved the survey team. The human trainee had faced down apex predators. The human trainee had made the Valkyrie retreat. Nobody was laughing at humans anymore. In her quarters, Commander Elitha sat at her desk, watching the recording from her personal scanner for the 12th time. The footage was shaky and imperfect, captured during the chaos of the encounter, but it showed enough. It showed Do-hyun stepping forward while everyone else froze. It showed him standing before the Alpha, calm and steady. It showed him walking away with his back turned, the ultimate display of confidence. And it showed the moment the predators retreated. 300 years of field work, 200 worlds surveyed, thousands of species studied. Elitha had thought she understood how the universe worked. Predators hunted prey. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order, but she had never seen anything like what the human had done. She had never imagined that such a thing was possible. There was a chime at her door. She closed the recording and said, "Enter." The door slid open. Dr. Kang Yuna stepped inside, the human medical liaison, whom Elitha had barely acknowledged in the 2 years they had served together. "Dr. Kang," Elitha said, "is there something I can help you with?" "I wanted to speak with you, Commander, about what happened on the surface." Elitha gestured to a chair. Yuna sat, her movements calm and unhurried. Another human characteristic that Elitha was beginning to notice. They moved differently than other species. More efficiently. More deliberately. "I've watched the recording," Elitha admitted. "Multiple times. And I still don't understand. The human Do-hyun, he should have died. The moment he stepped forward, the Alpha should have killed him. Why didn't it?" Yuna smiled softly. "That's the question, isn't it? Why didn't the predator attack the easy prey? It makes no sense. He had no weapons. No armor. No natural defenses. He was completely vulnerable. But he didn't act vulnerable," Yuna said. And that's what confused the Valkyrie. They had never encountered anything like him before. Elitha shook her head. "I've seen other species try to bluff predators. It never works. The predators can smell fear. They can sense weakness. They always know when something is prey. The Valkyrie could probably smell Do-hyun's fear too," Yuna agreed. His heart was racing. His body was flooded with stress hormones. He was terrified. Then why didn't they attack? Because he didn't act on that fear. And that contradiction is what made them hesitate. Yuna leaned forward, her eyes meeting Elitha's. Commander, do you know what makes humans unique? It's not our intelligence. It's not our technology. It's not even our endurance, though that's part of it. What makes humans unique is that we evolved on a planet where we were not the apex predator. We were prey. Elitha frowned. Many species evolved as prey. They learned to run, to hide, to avoid predators. Yes, but humans couldn't run fast enough. We couldn't hide well enough. Our ancestors lived on open plains where there was nowhere to hide and nothing to climb. They were surrounded by predators that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than them. Then how did they survive? Yuna's smile widened. They cheated. They broke the rules of predator and prey. Instead of running, they stood their ground. Instead of hiding, they made eye contact. Instead of acting like food, they acted like something dangerous. And over millions of years, that behavior became instinct. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. It's called predator intimidation. Scientists on Earth have studied it for centuries. Humans who encounter dangerous animals and stand their ground have a much higher survival rate than those who run. The behavior is so effective that it's been passed down through countless generations, hard-coded into our brains. But why does it work? Elitha asked. The human is not actually dangerous. The predator should be able to see through the bluff, because predators aren't stupid. They calculate risk and reward. A hunt that goes wrong can leave them injured, and an injured predator often becomes a dead predator. So, they're careful. They choose easy targets. They avoid anything that might fight back. Yuna turned back to face Elitha. When Do-hyun stood his ground, when he showed no fear, when he walked toward the Alpha instead of away, he was sending a message. He was saying, I'm not easy. I'll cost you something. Is killing me worth the price? And the Alpha decided it wasn't. Exactly. The Alpha couldn't understand why this small, soft creature wasn't afraid. That uncertainty made it cautious. And when Do-hyun threw those rocks, demonstrating that he could hurt them from a distance, that uncertainty became doubt. The Alpha decided to retreat and find easier prey. Elitha was silent for a long moment, processing what she had heard. 3 centuries of assumptions about humans crumbled in her mind. She had thought they were primitive, emotional, weak. She had thought their survival was luck, not skill. She had been wrong. I should speak with him, she finally said. With Do-hyun, Yuna nodded. He's in the medical bay. Thora is treating a minor scratch he got during the encounter. I think he would appreciate a visit from you. Elitha rose from her desk and made her way through the ship. Crew members who had ignored her human trainee now watched him with new eyes. Some nodded respectfully as she passed. Others whispered to each other, repeating the story of what had happened on Velkar 7. She found Do-hyun sitting on a medical bed, while Thora applied a bandage to his forearm. The young human looked tired, but there was a quiet strength in his posture that she hadn't noticed before. Or perhaps she simply hadn't bothered to look. Commander, Do-hyun said, starting to rise. Stay seated, Elitha said. She stood before him, searching for words that didn't come easily. Trainee Park, I have something to say to you. Do-hyun waited, his expression calm. That same patience he had shown against the Valkyrie. That same unreadable steadiness that she had mistaken for blankness. In 300 years of field work, Elitha began, I have never seen a species do what you did today. Our security protocols, our technology, our weapons, none of it worked. And you? She paused, struggling with unfamiliar humility. You made them retreat, with nothing but your presence. I was scared the whole time, Do-hyun admitted. I thought I was going to die. But you didn't show it. You didn't run. Why? Do-hyun thought for a moment before answering. Humans evolved on a planet where everything wanted to eat us. We couldn't outrun predators, couldn't outfight them, so we learned to convince them we weren't worth the trouble. He met her eyes with that steady gaze. We're not apex predators, Commander. We're something stranger. We're the species that made apex predators nervous. Elitha felt something shift inside her. Respect, yes, but also curiosity. A desire to understand this strange species that she had dismissed for so long. Trainee Park, she said slowly. I believe I owe you an apology. For how I treated you. For what I assumed about your kind. She paused. And I would like to learn more. About humans. About how you see threats differently than we do. Do-hyun smiled. A real smile this time. Warm and genuine. Without the teeth. I'd like that, Commander. No. Thora finished applying the bandage and stepped back, a rare expression of approval on his scaled face. Perhaps, he rumbled, we should update the Survey Corps training protocols. Include some of the human methods. Perhaps we should, Elitha agreed. Outside the medical bay windows, the stars glittered against the endless black of space. Somewhere out there, on 100,000 worlds, apex predators hunted their prey, following rules that had governed life since the beginning of time. And somewhere among those stars, humans continued to break those rules. To stand when they should run, to fight when they should surrender, to make predators think twice. They were new to the galaxy. They were soft and small, and physically unremarkable. But they had survived a death world through sheer stubbornness and psychological warfare, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant.